Today, we are focused on one team and one team only. It is the Big Ten champion Oregon Ducks. Whether it's looking forward to next year and the 2025 season with a lot of transfer portal discussion, or whether it's previewing that Rose Bowl, that college football playoff quarterfinal from the Oregon Ducks perspective, we got Duck Nation covered from start to finish, as this one is about all things Oregon. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to all of the Oregon Duck fans out there. Welcome to this special Big Ten TED Oregon exclusive live stream where we're covering all things Oregon. Of course, the 13-0 Big Ten champions for the 2024 season. Folks, we have got a lot to cover, right? There's been some transfer portal news that I really haven't gotten to quite yet, but I kind of waited until we got a cluster of guys that are kind of coming in, and now is the correct time, certainly, to be able to do that. So what are we covering? Let's get into the game plan here. We are going to be talking transfer portal discussion, roster construction type of discussion with our buddy Max Torres from Scoop Duck at On 3. So that will come here in just a little bit. Yeah, I know this is just how the college football calendar works. I know we're in 2024. I know the Oregon Ducks are the number one seed, but, you know, at the same time, we still got to look ahead to 2025 and see how that roster construction is going as well. We're going to welcome in former Oregon Duck tight end George Wrighster, the host of the Unafraid Show on YouTube, and he's going to give us a little bit of an Oregon perspective on the Rose Bowl game, that college football quarterfinal between the Oregon Ducks and the Ohio State Buckeyes, certainly, of course, as well. So that's what we got coming up here today. Wanted to get some thank yous out of the gate here right away, because this Oregon exclusive live stream, this all things Oregon, whatever you want to call it, is here because of you. Because, man, you guys, Duck Nation, you guys have showed up on the BTT side of things, no doubt about that. You know, I really started covering a lot of Oregon stuff, you know, the Washington games last year, even the USC game. I think I previewed that one a year ago as well. And, you know, you guys were certainly showing up for that. You guys have just been so hospitable, so nice to me. So I certainly wanted to be able to return the favor. But 9 of the top 10 videos in the last 90 days are either Oregon videos or Oregon heavy videos, where it might be split with certainly something else. It's combined for over 106,000 views over the last 90 days, right? So maybe a message to other Big Ten programs out there. You put up those kinds of numbers, you'll get your own show, certainly, as well. And then I also want to send out a big thank you, a little bit of a personal thank you. I put out on X to say, hey, wife and I, we're taking a trip out to Oregon, right, this year. Where should we go? Where's some good camping spots? Where's some, where's some hidden gems? Over 120 replies on that. So I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody for replying on that. I'm really looking forward to seeing the state of Oregon this summer. I'm convinced it's not a real place. I look at photos, I look at Instagram, I look at videos, and it's just like there's way too much beauty in one area for that to be real. So I'm looking forward to find out if it is indeed an alien planet. So looking forward to that. All right, thank yous out of the way. How about some news from today? Early enrollees. We've got 12 of the 20 signees of the 2025 class on campus. How about Achilles Smith Jr., Jaron Kavawe Sagapulatelli, of course, that quarterback post Dante Moore, probably going to be one of those guys at the quarterback position as well. Cooper Perry, we'll talk about him a little bit. He's a wide receiver coming in. Former Washington commit Vander Plug was there as an early enrollee at the tight end position on campus. Man, you look at the bottom of that. Look at those two. Look at those. That's secondary. Dorian Brew, Trey McNutt, a couple of five-star guys on campus as well throughout all of this thing. Notable names not on campus: Naeem Offord, Brandon Finney, of course, the all-everything from Duncanville, Texas, and Dacorian Moore as well. So will those guys show up on campus? Will they not? Will they be enrollees, or will we see them during the summer? There might be somebody who knows the answer to that question, and I'm excited to have him join us certainly right now. His name is Max Torres from Scoop Duck at On 3. Max, it's great to talk to you again. We talked during the summer before the season. Is this Oregon team going to be one of the best in the history of the Ducks? Well, 13-0 Big Ten champs. They're certainly on that track, certainly. But I want to talk about these kids that I just mentioned, these possibly early enrollees, the Offords, the Finneys, the Moores. What do you know about maybe seeing more of these kids possibly coming to campus, or are these kids going to come here during the summer?
Well, I know for a lot of those guys that you just mentioned, Ted, that most of them are on campus already, or if they're not, you also have to keep in mind that you have some of these all-star games that are being held right now. I know the Under Armour All-American game is being held out in Florida, and then I'll myself be going to San Antonio for the Adidas All-American Bowl. So sometimes these guys get to campus, and then they leave to go to those games, and they come back, or sometimes they get to campus and they don't go to those games. So I know that Dan Lanning said that they're going to be expecting about 15 early enrollees after his early signing period presser. Okay. So it's just super important to be able to get these guys onto campus early. It's the new norm in college football, and I know that Lanning kind of compared it to almost like having them for spring practice, even for this Rose Bowl playoff run prep. So getting those guys on campus, getting them up to speed in the weight room and the playbook, all those things are incredibly valuable. And the more time you can get with them, the better, just hoping that they're going to be ready for the 2025 season.
All right, let's talk about a guy that won't be on campus because he's no longer with the Oregon Ducks program, that being Dallas Wilson. I know this kind of happened a little bit ago, but I certainly wanted to kind of group this in with everything else happening. Five-star wide receiver out of the Tampa area, ultra-talented player. Look, we all know that. And please correct me if I'm wrong with this particular situation, but I believe he had a family member who was ill down in Florida, so he was able to be released from his national letter of intent, or whatever they sign now, to be with a particular school. But so you lose Dallas Wilson as a part of this 2025 class, but I'm kind of sitting back here and I'm looking at this wide receiver room, the way they've recruited the past 2 years. I look at Jeremiah McClellan. I look at Ryan Pelham. I look at this year. I look at Dacorian Moore. I look at Cooper Perry. We'll talk more about him here in just a little bit. Like I still feel very confident in Oregon, right? They've recruited this position certainly very well. How do you see the future of the wide receiver room now without Dallas Wilson?
Yeah, just to get back to that first point, was I did hear some rumors about some family stuff going on with Wilson. So I think that you're probably spot on there, or at least on the right track about that, maybe playing a factor in him being released from his paperwork and agreement to Oregon. But just as far as him no longer being on the team or expected to come in, I was talking to a buddy of mine and I was saying, it's just kind of funny. It's a little suspicious. There hasn't really been that true heartbreak yet for Oregon on their recruiting trail. Maybe it was Lincoln Cure, who I had predicted was going to flip from Kansas State to Oregon, and that ultimately didn't happen. So I gotta own up to when I'm wrong. But I think most people expected him, at least going into signing day, to flip that commitment. But he's going to be a Kansas State Wildcat. So not having Dallas Wilson in the fold anymore, Ted, I think it stinks, but it's not really a class breaker, not a massive deal if you're Oregon, because you have some of these other guys in the wide receiver room and in the 2025 signing class, whether you're talking about Dacorian Moore, the number one wide receiver in the country, or Cooper Perry, a really talented four-star out of Arizona that probably flew under the radar nationally because he plays in Arizona. I think if he played at a modern day at St. John Bosco, somewhere in California, he would be much more discussed than he is now. Also a really talented lacrosse player. So getting him to campus and having him being able to just focus on football, I think is going to be really exciting. And there's plenty of talent in that room to work with for Junior Adams.
Yeah, and yeah, you just mentioned a great name there, Junior Adams, right? What do we know about Junior? He can develop wide receivers, right? What he did with Troy Franklin, a 1,400-yard season back there in 2023. And one guy that we didn't mention there, Jerry Dickey, a former 5-star, right? Maybe things haven't exactly gone his way to start off, but he certainly, of course, had the recruiting profile behind him to possibly emerge maybe when some of these other players move on. Let's talk about Cooper Perry a little bit. And you used my Max read the show notes because that's exactly what I have here. He maybe flew a little bit under the radar when, of course, DeCorian Moore out of Duncanville he's certainly going to be up here. You watch his tape and then you watch him at the state championships down there in Dallas, and that certainly went viral, and that was fun to watch. But now with Dallas Wilson out of the picture, does that kind of allow Cooper Perry to kind of maybe frees up a little bit of room for I'm not saying he's going to make an impact as a true freshman, but certainly in his younger years at Oregon, does that maybe allow him to maybe rise up the ranks a little bit and have an opportunity to be able to get on the field and make an impact in his first maybe 2 years at Oregon?
I think it opens the door for more opportunities, for more snaps. Anytime you have less competition in a room, I think that's going to be the case. But we also have to look at the reality of the situation that a guy like Jurion Dickey or Jeremiah McClellan, Ryan Pelham, those young receivers just haven't seen the field too much lately. So I don't think that that's necessarily the expectation. I mean, look at a guy like Justice Lowe from the 2022 recruiting class. It took all the way up until Tez Johnson got hurt for him to really kind of see a decent chunk of snaps. So the expectation, I think, is probably that DeCorian Moore is going to have some sort of a role, even as a true freshman. That is the caliber of talent that we're talking about here, Ted. But I'm certainly not discounting Cooper Perry and what he's going to be able to bring to the field once he kind of gets his feet under him and gets rolling in that offense, because he is just a guy that makes plays and shows up. Certainly one of the guys I'm more excited about seeing in this offense. And I think just looking at the wide receiver position, you want to have those experienced guys that give you a good, stable floor. But I also think that if you're an Oregon fan, you want your Ryan Williams. You want your true freshman that's like, hey, this guy's so good. I don't care that he just got here. We can't keep him off the field. He's going to be ready to go early.
I think that's DeCorian Moore. They're going to get him on the field. I just feel that next year. You made a good comparison there with Ryan Williams, and you look at DeCorian and maybe his size and his skill set. You look at Tez Johnson, who's going to be leaving kind of out of the slot. We'll see if DeCorian plugs into that role. All right, let's pivot and talk about the transfer portal right now. You know, there's a handful of guys that have exited the program since the end of the regular season, since the end of that Big Ten championship game. Jaden Moore, Amari, and Winston out of the linebacker room, and we saw them sparingly, within that linebacker rotation. I don't anticipate that this is going to affect maybe this rotation in a big way. What's kind of your opinion on how this linebacker rotation now looks without Moore and Winston? We saw this linebacker room really, Betcher certainly got better. Devin Jackson certainly got better this season. So kind of your thoughts on these two guys specifically and how the linebacker rotation is going to look like.
For those two guys specifically, I think you're probably looking a little bit more at the outside linebacker spot, maybe even DN, depending on how you want to look at it. We're splitting hairs here with what you're talking about, yeah. But I think that those were two of the more surprising departures, in my opinion, because they did have a good role in that rotation. Heck, you even saw Marion Winston lining up over the nose tackle, the center, at times. And I thought that was really cool, just seeing them utilize him in a couple of different ways. And Jaden Moore was a guy all season, Ted, who I felt like, he's just that close to breaking through to get a sack. And he did get a sack. I think it was in the Big Ten championship game, if not maybe the Washington game. So those are young guys that were getting involved in this defense and fighting for bigger roles. But I think that their departures ultimately signify that you feel really good if you're Oregon, just about the talent you have in that room, the production you have in that room, whether it's Mateo Uyunglele or Blake Purchase, who I've been hearing is someone to watch for in the playoffs here. So you don't like seeing those guys go, but you have plenty of guys to step up. And I think that Elijah Rushing could be one that we're keeping an eye on for 2025, because he's a former 5-star that has kind of been waiting in the wings.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of those guys, and that's the thing when some of these guys transfer this late in the season during a playoff run, it opens an opportunity for these younger guys to be able to make a contribution as well. All right, let's take a look at some of these incoming transfers. Bear Alexander at defensive tackle. When I first heard that Bear indeed was going to visit Oregon, and I kind of my point, and I kind of heard this on the QB11 show with QB and Doug, and they kind of echoed this as well. It kind of seemed like when they brought him on campus, it wasn't necessarily to pitch him. It wasn't necessarily to recruit him. Oregon speaks for itself. And you kind of look at the issues that have maybe been with Bear. It was to vet him to see if he's going to buy in to what they're doing, certainly at Oregon, and certainly see if he's ready, maybe between the ears right now. How do you view the risk versus the reward? Certainly with Bear Alexander, something to keep in mind. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining.
I view the Bear Alexander edition as a low risk, high reward situation for Oregon, because you can say what you want about the questions or concerns, whatever it is about his character or between the ears, like you mentioned, Ted. I'm not saying anything negative about him, but I know that that's out there. I think most of us do as far as his departure from USC goes. But this is a perfect opportunity for Bear Alexander. Dan Lanning's culture is not going to be broken, hypothetically, by one player. That's just how well he has this thing humming. It's a culture that emphasizes accountability and playing for that guy next to you. So I think the players that Alexander's going to be surrounded by. You look at Uyunglele, who we talked about. I don't think Derek Harmon's going to be coming back with the season he's having. Amari Washington will be back, though, so he's going to have a great situation to walk into. You look at what Dan Lanning, Tosh Lapoy, and Tony Tuioti have been able to do with defensive linemen since Lanning got to Eugene, and that arrow is going way up. I think Alexander really helps be a plug-and-play guy for this defense in 2025. 6'3", 315. That's what you're looking for on the interior, and he's played some pretty high-level ball. You have to think that the 2023 season was the best season of Pac-12 ball that we've seen in a couple of years, right? And then also having that experience at Georgia with the big boys in the SEC, that's only going to help you. And I think him getting to Eugene is going to be the perfect opportunity for both parties.
Yeah, I agree. Low risk, certainly high reward. We know it. Bear Alexander, he's got all the talent in the world. If he can get right, boy, this is a player I think that could come in and could make an immediate impact, certainly for the Ducks. From the defensive line, let's talk about now the offensive line. Johnny Cornelius is going to be out of eligibility. Josh Connerly probably ends up in the National Football League. So you need to upgrade with starters. You kind of look at what's maybe coming back on the at the tackle position for Oregon. I think they certainly needed a boost from the transfer portal guys with experience. Alex Harkey comes over from Texas State. Isaiah World, people think the world of him, coming out of Nevada over there. 2 of the best tackles in the portal. How big was it to get these types of guys, knowing that you're going to have a young quarterback in Dante Moore, and it's always great to be able to protect a young guy?
It's huge. It's huge. The tackle spot is a premium position on a football team and certainly in the transfer portal. So you knew as those top names got in the portal, Oregon was going to be doing their homework and vetting those guys, finding the right ones to go after. I think Harkey was one of the more interesting guys because of his JUCO story. I was interviewing one of his former coaches and learned that he actually was planning to play D-line coming out of high school. So tackle wasn't really even in the cards for him. But, hey, I think he's doing all right for himself and will be a huge, huge asset for Alik Terry along that offensive line once he gets to Oregon. And then for World, he is a massive dude. I don't think he allowed a sack in 2024, so he's got a really tremendous body of work. You also look at that San Diego connection that continues to grow for Oregon, with World being a former Lincoln Hornet. They just won a state title led by Oregon quarterback signee, now true freshman enrollee, Akili Smith Jr. So I think that having those 2 tackle spots handled when you have a quarterback transition, regardless of if you have a quarterback transition or not, you want to have those taken care of. But I know Dante Moore's got to have a big smile on his face, as does the rest of that quarterback room, knowing those 2 guys are coming to town.
Max Torres of Scoop Duck at On 3 joining us. We're talking all things transfer portal, and college football calendar has us talking about 2025 when the best team of the country is still in the quarterfinals here in 2024. I got a question here from the chat here from Sam and A. If everybody's got questions for Max, please submit them here. How comfortable do you think Oregon should be with Dante Moore as their QB1? We kind of mentioned it with Bear, got all the talent in the world, and I think Dante certainly has all the talent. I thought this year was so big for him, that UCLA, I just feel like at UCLA, they kind of pushed him in the fire a little bit too soon with that situation. How big was it for Dante to kind of sit and learn, do you think, this year? And how prepared do you think, and how comfortable do you think the Ducks are going to be? Austin Novosad is no slouch either. So an interesting quarterback situation for next year.
Dante Moore was really, at the time, in my opinion, a luxury addition for Oregon. They had the best transfer portal haul at quarterback last offseason, and the fact that they were able to get a player of his caliber that probably would have started at, a handful, every other program except for, 10 schools maybe. And all of college football was just tremendous. So tip of the cap to the Ducks to get that one done. But being able to bring him in with the expectation and assumption that he was going to sit behind Dillon Gabriel, learn for a year, has been crucial. And he's gotten some reps, but maybe not as much as you'd like to see. But that's the beauty in it. This is a guy who, even though he put it great, Ted, thrown into the fire at UCLA, he got a bunch of really good reps. I mean, maybe it didn't look super pretty all the time, but and I said this when he committed, he's probably the most experienced backup that Oregon's had in I don't know how many years, just because of the way that things have gone in Eugene and the roster movement. So it's hard to get a backup with quality experience and quality reps. And Dante has kind of almost a whole season. I don't think, because they were back and forth a little bit. So maybe like 3/4 of the season as the starter that he's bringing with him. Then he got to learn behind Dillon Gabriel. So I think Oregon should be pretty comfortable with Dante Moore as their quarterback one next year. It's going to be some growing pains, as is the case with any quarterback transition. Look what we saw with Dillon Gabriel this year, perfect example. But I think you feel good about it if you're an Oregon fan going into next year.
And then is this pretty solidified that Dante's going to be the guy? Ben kind of comes up here and said kind of what I was talking about with Austin Novosad could certainly challenge Dante as well. Do you see that? How much of a battle do you see that certainly going into the offseason? For me, it kind of seems like, for Austin Novosad played pretty well during the spring game. I certainly remember of that. Does it seem like you're only going to have one of these guys when 2025, a fall rolls around with this portal period and then the spring transfer portal period? Does it kind of seem like that's maybe the direction that it's heading?
I certainly think that Novosad could challenge more because I do think I'm right there with you as far as him being a quality quarterback, a guy who looked good in the spring game. But I will say that the popular talking point in this conversation is that Dante is probably going to be that guy, and you never know what's going to happen in the area of the transfer portal. But if you're looking at these two guys, I think that you're feeling more comfortable right now as it stands with Moore being on the roster than Novosad. So, I mean, I never like to speculate on transfers because everyone's got their unique situation and whatnot, other things going on. But I think that's just from my sense of it and where things are at among the Oregon conversations among the fan base. I think that's probably where things are looking like.
All right, let's get back into this transfer portal discussion right now. Let's talk about the secondary. Everybody gone next year. That's kind of very experienced secondary, certainly, on this team right now this season. They lose just about everyone on the back end. Dylan Thaman and Darren Johnson, two guys that have a lot of Big Ten starting experience. Let's start first with Dylan Thaman. He's totaled over 200 tackles in his first 2 years at Purdue, a freshman All-American a couple of years back during his freshman season. What stands out to you to have a talent like Dylan Thaman at safety? Because it seems like the safety position with Oregon is they've been certainly climbing up the ladder and getting better. No disrespect certainly in anybody, but you have certainly a guy a couple of years ago, it was last year, a guy like Steve Stevens, and now a couple of years later, you're kind of rising up above to get a guy like Dylan Thaman. What does it say about this program to be able to bring in a talent with this Big Ten experience like Dylan Thaman?
It's huge. I think I keep saying that about every guy, but that's just the way that they're operating right now, Ted. You're hard pressed to find another program that manages transfer portal as well as Oregon does. They bring in almost all impact guys in some way, shape, or form, and they very seldom lose guys that they really want, guys that they really need. As it pertains to the safety spot, that is a position that I think I'm almost most interested in for this Oregon team moving forward because the arrow has steadily been rising up. But at the same time, I think they've gotten a little bit reliant on the transfer portal for their starting safeties in the past couple of years. So if you can couple a guy like Dylan Thaman, who is young but proven with 2 years under his belt, and you can kind of pair him with a guy like maybe Aaron Flowers, who I keep hearing really good things about, but we haven't seen too much about. Kingston Lopa, another young guy that you're building through the prep recruiting. I think that's a recipe for success. So with Dylan Thaman, I love the fire that he plays with. I like that he has already been in the Big Ten for 2 years. You talk about a team that's getting ravaged by the portal. I think that would probably be the Purdue Boilermakers. But he made an instant impact right when he got to college. You saw quite a fall off from 6 interceptions in 23 to no interceptions in 24, but he was still active and around the ball with 6 pass breakups and a whole bunch of tackles, even 4.5 tackles for loss. So I think that he was the number 1 portal safety for a reason, and I know that Duck fans are happy he's coming to Oregon.
These are 2 experienced guys, which we've certainly outlined so far. And you kind of mentioned how there's this balance between, okay, you have a lot of guys from this team that are departing, but we've recruited really well. So where's the balance? But I've kind of got the depth chart kind of pulled up here. You mentioned Aaron Flowers at safety in there as well. Peyton Woodyard is a safety. Trey McNutt is going to come in as a safety. So it's this balance where, obviously if you bring in that type of talent, you want to be able to develop it. You want to turn them into all conference players. But are they ready to go at a certain point? That's kind of the balance that this Oregon staff has to certainly deal with. And it is certainly a pleasure to be able to have that luxury, right? It's a good problem to have, I should certainly say. Let's talk about Darren Johnson, because I think these 2 guys, right, they will both have a leadership, maybe responsibility to them for some of these younger guys at the corners and at the safeties to be able to learn from guys that have started multiple years in the Big Ten, I think is huge. So Darren Johnson started every game for Northwestern over the past 2 seasons. How important, kind of going off of that point with the younger guys, how important is it to be able to, for some of these younger corners, and I guess you could talk about the safety with Dylan Thaman, to be able to have these type of experienced guys, probably both for 1 year. I think Thaman has an extra year. I doubt he'll take it because he's certainly proven that he's a great defensive player. But how important is it for these younger guys to be able to learn from these guys that have succeeded at the Big Ten level?
It's obviously an added bonus if you're a young corner on this Oregon roster, but at the same time, Ted, I think what's so exciting about 2025 is that aside from Darren Johnson, you're largely looking at a group that I think is going to be led by a lot of young guys. Someone like a Dakota Fields or an Ife Obadegwu that you can talk about. Brandon Finney's coming in, Dorian Brew's coming in. So there's a lot of guys in that room that I think are going to be pushing each other and competing for some good snaps. You look at the uncertainty that comes with losing so many starters from your secondary, but I think you also have to look at the excitement that comes with that uncertainty. I've covered this team long enough that there's times where it's like, okay, you have this group, you're excited about it, but let's just get some new blood in there and see what these guys can do. I think there's no one that's more excited about that than me as someone who really likes covering recruiting. It's fun getting to see the whole thing come together. And I'm excited to see a guy like Dakota Fields, who I was hearing a lot of great things about. He had an interception in that spring game, but then an injury cut his season short. Jaleel Florence, another guy that we haven't seen too much of this year, but I know he's been battling some injuries as well. So what does he look like if you're looking all the way ahead to 2025? And there's plenty to be excited about in that room led by Rashad Wadood and Chris Hampton.
I can imagine. I mean, you're on the recruiting trail all year, and, you see these guys, and then you see them during their high school tape, and you cover them, you interview them, and you get them on campus. It's, I want to see these guys play. I want to see, so when you see those transfers, you hope that maybe certainly that young talent can certainly develop. All right, let's talk about a transfer that I'm pretty excited about. A guy that's going to maybe pair with Kenyon Sadiq at the tight end position. Jamari Johnson coming over from Louisville, 6'5", 265 pounds. Yeah, that's going to be a pretty big target. 3 years of eligibility left. I'm intrigued to see the athleticism of Kenyon Sadiq and the size of Jamari Johnson at this tight end position. Of course, you got Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert, I believe, are both out of eligibility, certainly right now. So how do you kind of view Jamari Johnson pairing with Kenyon Sadiq, and what do you think his role is going to be maybe early in his Oregon career?
Jamari Johnson's one of the transfers I'm most excited about, too, because I got to cover him when he was coming out at Inglewood High School down in SoCal, and Oregon was involved late there. They had the OV, and they were trying to flip him from Louisville, as was Pitt, for a little recruiting backstory. But I think people are focused on the size of Jamari Johnson, and maybe that's not the only skill set that we need to be talking about, the only talking point. This is an athletic dude in his own right. He's got softer hands since he got to Louisville. I think he's really morphed his body. I think he was someone that won because he was just bigger and more athletic than a lot of his competition at the high school level, but now you got a lot more good weight and a lot less bad weight. So this is a guy that has a ton of intensity to his game and someone that I'm really excited to see in this Oregon offense. under Drew Maringer, and I'm excited that he has 3 years of eligibility left. I think that's one of the healthier transfer situations that you can be looking at if you're a coaching staff. So I think that he's going to pair really nicely with Kenyon Sadiq, and maybe Kenyon Sadiq is going to be so good because he's already proven that defenses aren't going to be talking enough or preparing enough for Jamari Johnson. So he's one of the guys I'm the most excited about for sure.
And let's kind of take a look at some other positions right now. Running back, if Whittington, now I think Noah Whittington will probably be back as your RB1 next season. Dewan Riggs, Jay Harris, Jaden Lamar is certainly in there as well. Do you kind of see Oregon a possibility of going after a running back as this transfer portal period goes along, or do you think they feel pretty comfortable about Dewan? We've seen Dewan Riggs a little bit this season, and we've seen him certainly flash later on in games. Or how do you think the running back room stacks up in a post-Jordan James era?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that question kind of starts with Jordan James and what he's going to ultimately decide to do. Because I think that he's the guy you're probably more confident in right now compared to Noah Whittington. That's the biggest thing for me with that running back room is just Noah Whittington's shown flashes, but he hasn't been nearly as consistent as Jordan James. So yeah. I think when you're deciding what that room looks like, it has to start with Jordan James. I think both guys have some eligibility remaining. I know Noah was a medical redshirt situation after last year's injury. So I wonder if he wants to come back with all the tread that he has on his tires, but he's a phenomenal player. I think you just want to see some more consistency from him. So to answer that question, I think they are going to be looking at their options in the transfer portal. We have to see what happens as this playoff runs its course. We did have an interesting name hop in the transfer portal this morning, Ted. I don't know if you had heard about it. Mekhi Hughes from Tulane. I saw that he was the older brother of Naeem Offord, the five-star Oregon cornerback that is expected to enroll early. So you have to look for the connections, though. I don't know on this coaching staff, at least, what the coaching connection is aside from that Naeem Offord relationship. But if Oregon does go after a running back in the transfer portal, I think it's going to be a guy who's experienced and has played some pretty good football so far, and more than likely would be a plug-and-play type of player. So the running back position, it's never a question of are there going to be good running backs in this room. It's just who are they going to be? Because everyone wants to come play running back at Oregon. That's just kind of the way things have gone over the recent years. So I'm excited to see what Rashad Samples can do with that room.
Here I am already shipping Jordan James off, but you're right. Yeah, it kind of starts with him to see, boy, man, if guys come back, they might not have a problem at all, certainly going forward. What about linebacker? To pair with Devin Jackson, you got Bryce Betcher, Bossa, Jacobs, I believe, are all going to be gone. Is that a position that you think that they're going to look for in the portal to be able to shore up some depth?
Yeah, I think they are going to look for a linebacker in the transfer portal. I feel weird saying this because I do need to do a little bit more digging, but just with some of the conversations that I've had, it does actually seem like Bryce Betcher could come back for another season. We just have to see kind of how that all works with his situation. He did get drafted in the MLB draft, but he's pretty good at football too, in case people haven't realized. So I think when you're looking at the linebacker situation, seeing what happens with Betcher, does he stay, does he go, is going to be a central part of that answer. But Devin Jackson's a guy you're super excited about. Jerry Mixon is another one that I've been hearing some good stuff about. He's played some good football, but hasn't he hasn't played that much football, but that's part of the excitement that comes with it. And then you have some All-Americans in that room, Braden Platt and Kamar Matudi that just got there in the 2023 class. And then someone like Gavin Nix that comes in from IMG. What does his role look like? You don't see too many young linebackers play early in their Oregon careers, but I know that Brian Michalowski has a really good track record and has that room playing some great football.
Yeah, that's it. I was listening to another shout out to Doug and QB, and they were saying, I think via the GPS tracking, that like Devin Jackson clocked the highest miles per hour. Yeah, it's crazy to be able to have that. They've certainly got a lot of explosive plays this year, so you might think it might be one of those guys, but he's certainly got a lot of speed behind him at the linebacker position. All right, Max, before you go, Rose Bowl, Southern California, that's your territory, man. We got classic Pac-12. I know we've certainly embraced here at this side Oregon being in the Big Ten, but you've got classic Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8 representation in Oregon. You've got classic traditional Big Ten representation in Ohio State. In one answer, how do you handicap this matchup between the Ducks and the Buckeyes on New Year's Day?
I see another close one, Ted, and On the one hand, I think a lot of Oregon fans, or some Oregon fans, I should say, might be having some issues being overly confident in this game.
Yep.
Coming out of that Big Ten title game and Penn State running wild all night. But they did get that first round bye. I think this Oregon team is going to be rested. I think Dan Lanning's going to have them locked in. He's been a phenomenal motivator, a master motivator, if you will, this year. I think it's really going to come down to if Oregon can establish the run, if they can limit explosive plays, and if they can win the turnover battle, because I think they did that in the first round and they won, and they still didn't even get that Jeffrey Basta interception early on. Who knows how that would have impacted the game, but we'll see how the defensive line looks. I think that group's going to need to play much better than they did against Penn State if Oregon wants to come away with a win. But I do ultimately think that Oregon is going to win that game. I remember I was writing my Scoop Duck prediction earlier on. So maybe I'm spoiling it a little bit, but I think I had Oregon winning by 7.
7 points. 7 points. That's going to be a good one. Ohio State currently favored right now. We always favor Max Torres over here. Max, thanks for coming on. Always good to talk to you. And here's crossing fingers for maybe another Oregon win. Continue to make the run through the college football playoff. Thanks again for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Ted. Appreciate it.
All right. Sounds good. That is Max Torres, a Scoop Duck of On3, recruiting and everything reporter, certainly over there as well. Coming up here in just a few minutes, we're going to be having George Wrighster, former Oregon tight end, current host of the Unafraid show on YouTube, breaking down this Rose Bowl between the Oregon Ducks and the Ohio State Buckeyes. In the meantime, we can certainly go to some questions here right now. Cody coming in the chat right now. It's wild. Everyone that is saying the Buckeyes are going to win, barely anyone is giving the Ducks a chance. And there comes the master motivator. That is Dan Lanning. I said it with Scott Reed on the Flock Talk podcast. I said, Dan Lanning, no matter what, is always going to find a way to motivate this team. All right, we've seen it on Ducks versus them all season long. Now, of course, he's not going to, people aren't just going to be motivated just because of a Vegas spread and where that currently sits. But this is an Oregon team. You best know in this type of situation and in this type of championship level. I know it's the quarterfinal only, but it certainly seems like a championship level game. Dan Lanning is going to have those boys ready to go. And this game is just so close. When you get to a matchup type of game, it's all about execution. We tend to regurgitate a lot of the same stuff. It's all about, it's about protecting the football. It's about, making big plays, making big explosive plays, stuff like that. But it's true. I think we keep on saying it because it's true. Because Oregon and Ohio State, for my money, and I think for a lot of people's money, the two most talented teams right now in all of college football. So, man, it just comes down to the little things. Everybody focuses on the big things. They focus on the players. They focus on the sexy matchups, but it really comes down to the little things. Will Ryan Day's Buckeyes or will Dan Lanning's Oregon Ducks be good at the little things? How about Ruben coming in here today, Mr. Ranchito? If you want to watch Max again, go back after this one. It will be archived on the channel. Ruben says, hoping everybody has a great Christmas. I had a great Christmas as well. You look at this shirt right here. I got to hide Ruben's comment here for just a minute so everybody can get the full effect. The Big Ten Conference inaugural season in 2024 just got that over the Christmas holiday. It seems like Santa has been watching the trends on the Big Ten TED channel, and he knows the fan base that has been most engaging. We kind of talked about that at the beginning of the show as well. Sam Kim chiming in here again. It's all about mentality. It's all that's what I said about that Ohio State-Tennessee game. It's all about between the ears. How was Ohio State going to come out right after hearing all of this for 3 consecutive weeks? Michigan and Michigan and Michigan and Michigan. What happened? How'd you lose to a 6-5 Michigan team? But hey, Ryan Day had these guys ready to play from the word go right away, and you saw those explosive plays certainly down the field, and mentality, right? If you're looking at Dan Lanning versus Ryan Day, who do you favor? I'll kind of pose this question back to the audience. Who do you favor in terms of having this team ready to go in this particular Rose Bowl game? There was someone I was talking to earlier today. I can't exactly remember. I've been talking with a lot of people here today about just what is going to be the score, what's going to be your prediction, Ted, of this particular game. And I'd be like, there's no doubt about it, this one's going over. This one's going over, and I haven't even checked the over-under, to be honest with you. Because what do we know, right? For Oregon fans that have been in the Pac-10 and the Pac-12 era, of course, I live in traditional Big Ten country. What do we know about the Rose Bowl? Points, scoring. It is always a fast track in Pasadena. It seems like when we put these teams together, whoever it is, year in and year out, I'm not saying it happens every year, but it seems like a lot of times we get these teams' best offensive performances of the season. Now, I think another reason for that is these teams being hyped up, these teams being ready to go, is the Rose Bowl being the granddaddy of them all, and people putting it all out on the line on that type of national stage because they know how important, whether it's been Big Ten versus Pac-10, no matter what it's been, whether it's been in the college football playoff era, people play because the Rose Bowl means something more. It just means that much more, certainly, to everybody right now. So mentality is certainly a big part of things going on right now. All right, let's move on. We're going to be talking Rose Bowl from the Oregon perspective. And right now, it is my pleasure to welcome in the host of the Unafraid Show. George Wrighster joins us now. George, it is great to have you on. A former Oregon Duck joins us now in a 6-year National Football League vet. We mentioned the host of the Unafraid Show. Now, before we break in and start to break down this Rose Bowl, first thing that I want to talk to you now, what's impressed you the most since you kind of left campus in Eugene, Oregon all those years ago? What's impressed you the most about this program's development, from Bellotti to Chip Kelly and now to Dan Lanning? What's kind of stands out to you as to how far this program has come?
Well, a lot of it, and this man doesn't get a lot of credit, is the athletic director, Rob Mullins, who's done a tremendous job at hiring basketball coaches, football coaches, women's basketball coaches, softball coaches, volleyball coaches. Like, he's done a great job, and also ushering, Oregon from the Pac-12 through a tumultuous situation and then making a seamless transition over into the Big Ten. So he deserves a lot of credit. So I would say just the ascension of the program, no matter who the head coach is, because as you mentioned Bellotti, who was my head coach. Then you move on to Chip Kelly. Then you have a little short stint with Mark Helfrich. Then you have Willie Taggart come in for a short period of time. He leaves and goes to Florida State. And then he left Mario Cristobal there. And I think that's one of the things. And Willie Taggart, who Oregon fans have some not so affectionate nicknames for him. He's a man who actually did some really good things for the program. Because there was a coach by the name of Scott Frost, who's back down at UCF right now. He used to be Oregon's offensive coordinator. Scott Frost says, you can't recruit big time high school recruiting classes to Oregon. That's why I don't want to be the head coach there. You can't recruit there at that level. No, you couldn't recruit there because you didn't have the stones to do it. And Willie Taggart came with the audacity of, why can't we get the number one class here? And he was putting together a great class. He bolts for Florida State because that was his dream job, which didn't work out that well. And then you got Mario Cristobal. He leaves Mario Cristobal there because he brought Mario Cristobal with him. Leaves Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal, he continues the relentless recruiting and developing the team with a level of physicality that Oregon fans weren't necessarily used to. And then you have Dan Lanning come in and bring the best of both worlds, the level of physicality and the type of offense that Oregon has been known for and that people who cheer for them have grown accustomed to.
All right, let's dive into this game. It's old school Pac-8, Pac-10. It's old school Big Ten, but now both of these teams come together as members of the Big Ten in this Rose Bowl right now. There's 60 minutes of great game tape out there from October 12th for both Ohio State and both Oregon. Now, you don't obviously, Oregon put up 32 points, Ohio State put up 31 points. So they both certainly played pretty well in terms of scoring the football and offensively. You don't necessarily want to get away from who you are, but how do these coaching staffs kind of blend that and what they do good and what they did well on October 12th? And how do they kind of blend that and then try to mix things up and not kind of just copy and paste everything together from that matchup, because you got to do things different to kind of get some of these game plans off a little bit.
Well, okay. See, this is the difficulty of being a offensive area defensive coordinator, right? It's like, what do you prepare for? Right. Do you prepare for the things that Penn State did that gave you trouble? Because Penn State ran a hurry-up offense against Oregon, which they hadn't really done all year to that magnitude, or which gave Oregon tremendous trouble? Or do you focus on the things that Ohio State did well against you last time? And if you're Chip Kelly and Ohio State's offensive coordinator, so do we go back to the well and see if that worked again? Or do we come up with a new wrinkle? That's the difficulty in game planning, because it's a schematic thing, and it's also a little bit of both, because both of these teams' rosters are really good. The coaching is really good. So it's going to come down to execution, and a lot of it has to do with some of it has to do with the scheme, like you just brought up, which is, are you going to look at that 60 minutes of film and say, all right, here are the coverages that worked well. Here are the offensive plays, the matchups that we like. Are we going back at those, or are they going to counter them, which is going to be a really good chess match between these two coaches?
And what worked well for the Oregon Ducks last time, Evan Stewart certainly got down the field with some big explosive plays. Dylan Gabriel had a great game. We'll get to quarterbacks here in just a minute. But, man, I talked about it when I previewed this game all the way back in October. Tight ends, Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq. Now, the tight ends have been getting better. G. Scott Jr. has been playing a little bit of a bigger role for the Buckeyes. I will certainly say that as of late. But, man, I tend to look at this football game, and maybe that kind of plays into my point of what I'm laying out here with G. Scott playing better and being more of an option in Ohio State offense. How big of a factor do you think tight ends are going to play when all of the attention might be on Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka and these great backs coming out of the back for the Buckeyes, and Tez Johnson coming out of the slot, and Holden and Stewart and all of these guys? How big of a factor do you think the tight ends can be in this game, specifically for the Ducks?
Oh, it's going to be a massive – the tight ends are going to be a massive, because they're going to be the difference in a couple of big plays and the difference in some drive extenders, some first downs. So – they're not just, none of those guys are run to the sticks and just stop kind of tight ends. They're explosive. They're playmakers. And honestly, Kenyon Sadiq is the best athlete on Oregon's team, period. Like pound for pound, the best athlete. The kid is, it's amazing to watch, because I was a hell of an athlete, and I'm looking at him like, bro, I don't even understand how I could play tight end with this level of athleticism on the field. You can hand him the ball. He can catch it. He can run. He can do everything. But I do believe, Ted, that a lot of this game is going to, that the whole overall who wins, who loses is going to be dictated by two crucial factors. But it's really one. It's the offensive line. Can Oregon contain Ohio State's rushing attack and make them one-dimensional, which I think if you had to choose Will Howard or Dylan Gabriel in terms of who you trust the most having to throw the ball a lot of times, you would probably choose Dylan Gabriel. Yeah. And then on the other side of it is who can get the best pass rush. You have Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimalau for Ohio State, and those two dudes in particular, very high-ranking guys coming out of high school, but Ohio State fans have been a little bit frustrated because they haven't generated the type of pressure from those two individuals without blitzing. So yes, their sack numbers have gone up since the Oregon game because they've started blitzing a little bit more. But when it just comes down to rushing for and getting pressure on the quarterback, Ohio State hasn't generated the type of pressure that they would expect. Whereas on Oregon's side, you have Tuioti, Mateo Uiagalelei, you have Jordan Birch. Those guys have been able to generate pressure without blitzing. And that is going to give now, if Oregon can generate pressure without blitzing on Will Howard, he will and historically has a tendency to put the ball at risk or be a little less accurate with the football. So, and then on Dylan Gabriel's side, he hasn't really been under pressure too much this entire season. So if you can generate pressure without blitzing, because if you have to blitz to generate pressure on him, he's shown that he can find one of these explosive playmakers on the offense. And in the last game, Igmanosin and some of them other, they had some trouble with the Oregon wideouts, especially when they decided to take them up top.
Oh, there's a lot to break down there, a lot to unpack there. I want to talk about Oregon. You talked about the lines. Oregon's offensive line. Look, you look at that Big Ten championship game, they were facing the best pass rusher for my money in college football in Abdul Carter. Josh Connerly played great against Abdul during that game.
He put that man in a headlock.
Right, exactly. And I thought both of the tackles, both Connerly and Cornelius, played really well. And you mentioned the pass rush, maybe a little bit of frustration, certainly at times. I feel that if these tackles play like they've played, certainly throughout this whole season, and Dylan's got time to throw, he's going to be able to certainly get a lot of plays down the field. I look to the other side on the defensive line. This was an Oregon D-line. And Oregon defense, I should probably say, as a unit. They allowed nearly 300 yards rushing against Penn State, 500 yards in this matchup. Ohio State, everybody talks about Simmons out for the year, McLaughlin out for the year. I thought Hinsman has done a good job of filling in at center. They've moved Jackson, the All-American guard, over to tackle. How do you see kind of the trenches playing out when you kind of factor all of that in this particular football game? Because I think Oregon might have an advantage on both sides of the football.
Oh, I definitely do think Oregon's offensive line has an advantage because they're healthy. You know what I mean? Right. And guys that you had starting are now, your original starters and a potential All-American center is out, right?
Yep.
And Simmons and McLaughlin are good players. And it is unlikely that the guys that you are replacing them with are that good. Now that doesn't mean that they're bad players or they can't hold up or anything like that. That just means that the task is a little bit harder. And depending on how the play goes, you may have to protect them a little bit with like chipping. And that means where the back is acting as extra help and hitting the defensive ends on the way out, or checking through the line on the way out, where Judkins and Henderson can't just take free releases like they might ordinarily do. So I would take Oregon's offensive line and Ohio State's offensive line. This is a challenge for them. Yeah. Right. This is a time where they're going to be able to sit up and at the end of the game either say, listen, well done, or they're going to be looking up at the end of the game saying, oh no, what did we do?
Yeah. I think a big part of this thing is also, I mentioned that Oregon defensive line. We know that they've got the horses. Mateo Uiagalelei led the Big Ten in sacks this year. Jordan Birch certainly wasn't far behind. You look at the middle with Harmon, right? Look at the first game that these guys played. Yep. Harmon just taking the football away.
Harmon was a menace.
Yeah. Early in that game, and Jamari Caldwell is just everybody looks at his size, but he's a pretty athletic guy, I think, for his size, certainly in there as well. Let's kind of go from the trenches and let's kind of work our way out to the perimeter. Ohio State showed some explosiveness on the perimeter against Tennessee. Jabbar Muhammad, Nico Reed, Dante Manning, all of those guys. How do you think that they can hold up against these receivers? I also think that it has the same type of factor in being that this defensive line needs to be able to get pressure so as these DBs don't have to cover as long.
Yep. The better your pass rush is, the better your cornerbacks are.
Right.
I mean, that's just the reality in high school football, college football, pro football. if you can limit the amount of time the quarterback has to run routes, that means that the less tricky that your plays can be in terms of running weirdo routes like they ran against Penn State, where they drug G. Scott all the way across and back up the field. And They did the same thing with Egbuka as well in that Penn State game. If you don't have time to run those types of plays, then you're not going to be successful. And this Ohio State receiving core is really, really good. Yeah. Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, G. Scott, and then 17. I don't know why his name is escaping me right now. Yes, Carnell Tate. This is a really talented wide receiver core. But what Oregon is going to have to do is similar to what they did in the last game, limit the up top plays. Yep. Like you can't let Jeremiah Smith get behind the defense. You can't let, Egbuka, when you're in cover 2, just run straight down the middle of the field untouched without rerouting him at all. You can't allow those sorts of things. And a lot of this is going to be adjustments, right? Because I do believe that you're going to see both of these offense at times play with tempo. Yep. Because one of the things that Ohio State and Oregon and any other top defense does not like is speed and hurry up, because they both like to disguise their coverages. They like to mix up what they're doing. They like to sub personnel for personnel. And if you're just hurrying up and not subbing, now that puts them in a position where now they have to call what you might refer to as a vanilla defense, which is just cover 2, cover 3, like there's no, getting a chance to disguise, shifting the defensive line, which Oregon and Ohio State both like to do. So I think that that's going to be the answer for both of these, for Will Stein and Chip Kelly, both offensive coordinators for each team, that some speed and some hurry up at times in this game is going to be employed.
Oh, let's talk quarterbacks in this one. Man, Dillon Gabriel's been a cool customer. And even going back to pre-Oregon, you look at when he was at Oklahoma leading that comeback against Texas to a victory over there. He has just been a cool customer, right? That's Ohio State game, certainly the first time around. You look at the Penn State game where he was just making plays after plays after plays. You look at Will Howard, couple of interceptions against Michigan, of course, sliding at the end of the game against Oregon over there. I tend to maybe trust Dillon Gabriel a little bit more in this type of big Rose Bowl, New Year's Day type of situation. Where do you kind of lean on which quarterback you maybe trust in this game? Both experienced guys, both transfer guys at their respective schools.
I know that the easy answer for some people who watch this is going to say, George, you're a homer. You're an Oregon guy. But if you're deep down, if you're honest with yourself, and you said, all right, we need a quarterback to throw it 50 times.
Yep.
And to be better throwing it 50 times. Who would you choose? And you can't throw any screens. Who are you going to choose?
I choose Dillon Gabriel.
You're going to choose, because he's been able to, in Oklahoma's offense, at UCF, he's so seasoned and so experienced as a passer, not just a leader and a quarterback, right? So Will Howard has shown some real impressive throws, particularly those layering throws over the corner, under the safety. Yep. Like he throws like he's one of the best corner throwers in all of college football. He has that down pat. The issue comes when the pocket is not clean for him. He's a big guy, though. I was standing on the field in the first game, and that was my first time up next to Will Howard. I was like, oh, I'm 6'3". I was like, oh, this is a big boy. It's bigums right here. Yeah. So he's built for it tough in terms of the way his body looks. But there's a certain level of contact courage and the ability to be accurate in those moments. And Will Howard at Kansas State dealt more with his legs, right? He was able to make a lot of plays. They called a lot of quarterback run when he was at Kansas State. They haven't called as much since he's been at Ohio State because they want to keep him healthy. And that's going to be the question. If they get some quarterback run early, because there's a lot of questions about, was he hurt in that Michigan game.
Right. Yep.
Because he took a couple of hits and then all of a sudden he turned into a pumpkin in terms of throwing the football. So the question is, was he hurt or was it just a couple of hits? And he's like, I don't really like that level of physicality because I am a quarterback. Now I have 2 quarterback sons. And one of them does not mind the contact. The other one, he's a little younger. He's like, don't hit my body. Do not hit my body. I will stand back there and throw it, but generally keep me safe. And there's different levels of quarterback. So Will Howard is going to have to be protected at the highest level, because if he's not and you start touching him up a little bit, that's when he hasn't been as good.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, it's just, you look at, I know the game plan was a little bit different against Michigan. They certainly weren't as explosive in the pass game as they were against Tennessee, but I think there's been a lot of talk about this offensive line for Ohio State, but I think Oregon certainly wants to see if they can expose it, right? It's certainly some of these players that can be shifted around, because I think if Oregon's offensive line plays the way I think we all know that they can play, and the defense just plays a good game, hell, if they play a great game, great. Then they get pressure on Will Howard. I think Oregon can certainly come out of the Rose Bowl with a victory in this particular game. Boy, we could keep on going on and on and on and on.
I just want to talk about one. I want to bring up one point, and it's funny because it's the national narrative right now. Nobody's giving Oregon a chance because they saw that Tennessee game. Ohio State, they're like, oh my God, Ohio State looks so great. They're rolling. And it's funny because if anybody's watched Oregon's cinematic recaps of every game, if you have not, I would advise you to go over to Oregon Ducks channel and go watch those cinematic recaps. They're in between like 4 and I think the longest one was the Big Ten Championship, which is like 16 minutes, and you will enjoy every bit of it. And Dan Lanning each and every week has had some sort of theme, some sort of messaging for the team, and it just has echoed and it's all come true every single week. And this time, I don't know for sure, but there's no way that he's missing every opportunity. That way, every national media person, every person who has a YouTube college football channel saying, oh, the Ducks have no chance. Oh, hey guys, why are we even practicing now? We don't have a chance. Ohio State is going to bludgeon us. Why are we even here? Actually, you know what? I'm going home. Y'all let me know how it works out. And the team is like, hell no, man. What you mean? All right, cool. And it reminds me of what happened last year, except for Oregon was on the opposite side of it.
Sure. Yep.
When the Pac-12 championship happened, after Washington beat Oregon at home, just like Ohio State beat Oregon beat Ohio State at home. They beat Oregon on a field goal. Yep. Washington was undefeated going into the Pac-12 championship. Oregon was a 9 or 9.5 point favorite going into the game. Washington, I talked to 2 of their players. They were upset. They were disrespected. They were focused, locked in practice. They were like 9.5 point favorites. What the hell is wrong with y'all? And this reminds me of that exact same situation. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have a great game, right, that players aren't going to play well, but I do believe Oregon does come out on top and win the national championship against Notre Dame.
Yeah, Dan Lanning, we know he is a master motivator. Whether they were favored by 2.5 or whether they're underdogs by 2.5, he's going to find a way. Ducks versus them. Big shout out to you, Scott Anderson, over there and his team, producing those Ducks versus them documentaries, certainly as well. All right, we'll get you out of here on this. Maybe for both teams. Actually, we'll just say, of course, just for the Oregon Ducks. What's one thing that Oregon needs to ensure that they do well if they want to end up with a victory in the Rose Bowl?
Well, I'll give it two things. Protect the football and make the plays you're supposed to make. Yep. That means you can't drop interceptions. You can't drop touchdowns. You can't drop first downs. So make the plays you're supposed to make and protect the football.
All right, George Wrighster from the Unafraid Show over there on YouTube. Man, this is going to be a fun one in Pasadena. I want to thank you for coming on and chatting the Rose Bowl here tonight.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me on, man. Can't wait to have you on as well. Love all the work that you're doing. And Big Ten Ted. I love it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll be hopping on and chatting on the Unafraid Show once the calendar flips to 2025. All right, that is George Wrighster from the Unafraid Show over there. And Oregon is certainly not afraid of everything that's going on at versus Ohio State. That kind of wraps up our All Things Oregon live stream here tonight. Folks, I just want to say thank you for this past year. It has been an amazing year kind of covering the progression of Oregon Ducks football all the way through it all. I am going to be having maybe a little bit of a more unbiased preview, certainly coming up for the Ohio State-Oregon game, as well as Boise State and Penn State here on this channel as well. So until next time, this has been All Things Oregon. If you like this, hey, we might just come back and do it all again. But no matter what, we are going to be going live after the Oregon-Ohio State Rose Bowl to break it all down, whether it is an Oregon win or whether it is an Ohio State win. You know there is going to be a lot to talk about when the sun fully sets behind the San Gabriel Mountains. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.